That's something Ronald Reagan understood. That's something JFK understood, that if you cut taxes and pull back regulations, millions of jobs will follow. And I intend to follow the path blazed by Reagan and JFK and do the very same thing.
Presidential candidate Ted Cruz looking for some cross-party appeal while campaigning in India. With us now, someone who knows a lot about one of the presidents that Cruz mentioned, best-selling author Michael Reagan. His new book, Lessons My Father Taught Me, The Strength, Integrity, and Faith of Ronald Reagan. Now, I've always been a huge fan of your father. He's one of the reasons I got involved in politics. And I'm driven crazy by how many people throw around your father's name.
Oh, really?
It's got to drive you batty.
Oh, listen, if I had a penny for every time they mention my dad's name, I'd own this show.
Right.
Yeah, it really is interesting to watch it all happen. We weren't looking for Abraham Lincoln when we elected Ronald Reagan.
Right.
We were looking for a leader. And, you know, we were lucky to have my father for the years that we had my father and the great job he did.
Right.
You know, I remember, I've talked to so many liberals, as you've talked to a lot of liberals. I had one of them come up to me one day and say, you know, I miss your father. I said, you miss my father? You voted against him every time he ran for election.
Right.
He says, I know, but I was with some friends the other night, and he says, I was telling them, I miss your father because your father had a good soul. Yeah. And what this country is missing today is that soul. And I think I really write about that in the book.
You talk about that. And you talk about the time on the ranch where your father would teach you how to ride. He taught you how to shoot a gun, taught you how to do so many things. And so many of these life lessons that Ronald Reagan taught you, he taught you at the ranch. Talk about him.
Taught me at the ranch. You know, came from a broken home. My parents broke up when I was 3. But, you know, my father never forgot that side of the family. Even when he married Nancy, he never forgot Maureen and myself. And we would see my father at the ranch, pick us up on a Saturday morning, drive us out to the ranch, regale us with every known story known to mankind, would sing every song of every military organization that there was, and just tell us stories and get out to the ranch, and we do chores, or he'd teach us how to ride. You want to spend a lot of time with Ronald Reagan? Learn to ride a horse. Right. Learn to swim. Learn to chop firewood. If you learn those 3 things, you'll spend more time with Ronald Reagan than anybody.
Actually, what Nancy Reagan always said as well, that she knew that if she wanted to be with Ronald Reagan, she had to go to that ranch.
Absolutely right. It's actually back in the early 50s, they were talking to Nancy and said, Mrs. Reagan, how do you like riding a horse? She said, I learned to ride a horse to capture a husband.
That's one way of looking at it. So is it okay to ask what your instinct is about what your father would think of Trump?
I think my father at this point would really be appalled the way this whole campaign is going. I think he would look at all the years he put in, the things that he accomplished, and can really worry about seeing all those things turned upside down. And because he really cared about this country. He doesn't like the name calling. He doesn't like the personal attacks, the 11th commandment. You know, when you run for election, you know, you have to get more than one group on your team to win a national election. And you don't spurn the other groups around you. And I think that would certainly upset him. I tweeted at Reagan World, which was my Twitter account, a couple of weeks ago, when people keep on saying, well, he's so much like your father. And I said, if Ronald Reagan were anything like Donald Trump, Nancy never would have married him.
No. Okay.
You have some lessons here. Love your family. Say I love you out loud. Listen to your family and make time for your family. Yeah. Again, lessons your father taught you.
That is so very important to do that. You know, we all get so busy sometimes, we forget we have the family at home. We forget to tell our children that we love them. And that can hurt a child. How many children wake up or go into adulthood and blame their parents for their failures? And I made that mistake for a long time because I was waiting for the I love you, and then I realized one day, how about I tell my father I love him? You know, I didn't tell my father I loved him until the 1990s. Wow. I was waiting for him to tell me. Yeah. And then I decided, you know, I'm going to tell my father I love him. You know what my father said? Well, I love you too. And I went, wow, that's all I ever had to do. And so it's so important to me, and I do this with my family, my wife, Colleen, we've been married 40 years. My son, Cameron, who's now married, we just got our first grandbaby, Marilyn Page. Our daughter, Ashley Marie. It's important for me to tell them I love them every day. And I was able to do that with my dad when he had Alzheimer's, and at the end days for him, that we had this relationship, and he knew that I loved him, I knew that he loved me, and that was so important.
The book is Lessons My Father Taught Me. Michael Reagan, thank you so much. Beautiful, lovely book.
Come back if
we'll
you
be
can.
right back.
When you're on the East Coast.
With more.
Do you get here often?
Listen, for you, Joe, I will.
Come
right,
on.
here we go.
Good. I love it.
We'll be right back with more on
Lessons
this
My Father
extended
Taught Me.
edition of Morning Joe.